Hello everyone, my name's Justin with Read Your Cards, and in today's video we're going to be going over 2 ways to be making Yu-Gi-Oh! Proxy cards that you can shuffle up and play with. I'm making this video because I think I've spent a lot of time and energy in researching into how to, 1, find the art assets for Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, and 2, the best ways to print them out. So when they're digital, they look great on your screen, but that doesn't always transfer over when you're trying to print them out yourself. So I wanted to make this video to go over that process, what I've learned from it, to share with you so that you can make your very own Yu-Gi-Oh! Proxy cards. One thing I was interested in doing was practicing with the best of the best decks, but it's really hard to commit that much of an investment into paper and ink when you can just paper and ink them yourself. So in this video, we're not trying to counterfeit Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, we're trying to create proxies so you can practice and play against them so you're ready in your locals or YCS or regionals so that you know kind of how the decks play, so you know how to best interrupt them. So enough talking, let's get started. So for the first method, what I originally did, and for a lot of decks that I printed out, was going to a website called YGOProDeck? Yes, YGOProDeck. It's a great website for finding deck profiles that you want to use, what people are using currently. They do a pretty good job at listing deck profiles from people who have won YCSs or regionals or worlds. It just takes a little bit of time to get them up, but this is the best place that I like to go to for that. But I found out this cool feature that they have on this other tab, which was a deck that I pulled up. It shows you all the cards, which is great. You kind of hover on them and they show you what the card says. That's great. What I didn't know is that you can go into this more drop down button and then go to download proxies. So when you click download proxies, it opens this new tab up. So you can basically download the Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards themselves. To be fair, these aren't the highest quality art assets, but they will get you to where you're going. If you just want to practice the cards, practice your combos, it's great for that. First, make it into letter format or A4. This is the first method. We're going to be using FedEx to print them, so I don't know if your local FedEx has an A4 sizing. They probably do, but I just click on letter, and the orientation, select what's best, auto. What you need to do if you want your cards to be the correct size is right now they'll be at a weird 80% ratio for some reason. What you're going to want to do is to click that up to 100% so that they're 100% the card size when they're printed. So they're not going to be even smaller than Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards are right now when you print them out. And then what you're going to want to do, what I like to do at least, is to add a 5mm gap in between the cards. So as you just saw, when it was at 0, it had 9 cards per page. But when you add the 5mm gap, it switches it to 8. So it best fits however many cards are going to be on the page. I like doing this because it's really easy to mess up when you're cutting them after you've print them. And this just gives you a little bit more leeway and it's not messing up another card. And this last setting, image source, so I use YGOProDeck's image source. I'm not really sure why they have this other setting. So the other setting, it gives you the same cards, but it takes away the descriptions. Not really sure why you would want that, but hey, it's an option. This main column, I really don't understand why they have it here. And then it shows you however many cards are in the deck itself. So including the main deck, the extra deck, and the side deck. So there's 72 cards. There's going to be 8 cards per page, and it just does a simple math for you. There's going to be 9 pages that you're going to be printing. That all looks good. You have your 8 cards per page, or however you want to do it. I do the 8 cards per page. You can make the PDF. It does take a little bit, maybe like 10 or 15 seconds based on your internet connection. I don't know if it's the internet connection or if it's just on their server downloading them into a PDF. So it'll pop up at the bottom here. Let me say show in. Let's just open it. So this is what the cards will look like. So again, this is at 100%. So these are the actual size of Yu-Gi-Oh cards. And there will be 9 pages in this PDF, just like we were told in the preview. Once you have this PDF, great. Make sure you know where it is on your computer. And then we can head over to FedEx. So the location's obviously going to differ with where your FedEx is, but once you go to FedEx.com, you'll want to go to the design and print. So you're going to explore print and products and design. Get started, I believe. And then I believe you can just upload a print right now. What I want to do is take the file, upload it to the FedEx website. This is letter size on FedEx website. So what you can do here is just browse their other options. So that's just the file option. The print properties. So this is going to be the size of your paper. What I like to do, or when I was printing at FedEx, what I like to do most often is go into the paper settings. So this is going to be like how thick the paper is. So 32 is kind of on a thinner size. What I like to go to is to the professional white papers. And what I think I did last time was I did 80-pound paper. What I found when I print at FedEx with 80-pound paper, it's a little bit too thick because I like to add a lamination on it. So I go to 60-pound paper, and then we can close out of that. Is there anything else you need to do? I believe that's the only thing you really need to do here. I have my own laminators, so what you can do is, if you have one, not a lot of people do, but if you don't and you want them to be a little bit thicker, so I think adding the lamination really adds just like the thickness of the card feel more realistic. What you can do at FedEx is you can add their laminating process. I think right here you hit add. And I just like to do with a 1/4 inch border, so it doesn't make the paper smaller like in the preview. It adds the 1/4 inch border around the entire page. However, when you do that, it does add to your cost. So instead of the cost being unclose. So instead of it costing $10 to print this deck out, it'll be around $30. So I got my own laminator, so I don't need it. So at the end of the day, this deck's gonna cost $10 or $11. Again, that's gonna be based off of how many pages you're printing out. So 9 pages is typically gonna run you around like $11.25. Once you get to the FedEx and they hand you your papers, they will ask, oh, does that look right? And you're like, yeah, sure, whatever. What they typically have at my FedEx, I don't know if it's at everyone's FedEx, but they have a rotary trimmer. So what I would do is when I laminated them at FedEx, when I would do that, I would use their trimmer that they had at the location. So going through just trimming them each card, it would take a little while, but it's really useful if you don't have one of these, just because it makes super clean, straight cuts. Then once you're done cutting it, I just toss them in sleeves. So I know that the corners are slightly rounded on Yu-Gi-Oh cards, but when they're in sleeves, you don't really notice them. So if you really want to go the extra mile, you can round the corners, but like, trust me, it's not worth the time when the ultimate goal is just to be playing with the proxy cards. That's the first method of making Yu-Gi-Oh proxy cards with FedEx. I don't do that anymore. I don't make them at FedEx anymore, just because I have my own printer and my own laminator and stuff, so I don't need to be going to FedEx each time I want to print a deck. These proxies are great, but like Nicole Kidman said in Stepford Wives, I can do better. Unlike the YGOProDeck.com method, this second method is definitely going to be a little bit more time consuming. However, I think that the payoff of the quality of the cards is so much better than what you're going to get with YGOPro. However, I understand people have limited time and resources, so whichever one kind of works for you is the one that's going to work for you. But I would definitely say the quality of the prints that I've seen now with this method are much higher, just because you're working with higher resolution assets that you can find on DeviantArt. So getting onto DeviantArt here. So this is just the place that I find all the card assets. I do use YGOProDeck to find a deck profile that I want to play with. So what you can do is go to the price breakdown. It'll be this window that you pop up. So what I'll do is I'll have this window open on half of my screen, and then have DeviantArt open on the other half. And what I'll just do is I'll go through each one of these names, copy and paste it into DeviantArt, and odds are you are bound to find it on DeviantArt. What you'll want to do is just enter in, so let's type or copy Abyss Dweller. So these are 3 profiles that have like the most high quality art assets that I like to use. So I just keep them in a tab just to remember their names. But you'll type in Abyss Dweller into the DeviantArt search bar, and you'll get a bunch of results. I typically hover just to look at who made them. So this is Masaki. So this guy, or not this guy, but he's another person who makes pretty high quality art assets. And what you'll do is for each card, you only have to do this once, and then you just have to make duplicates of it later. For each card asset, you just open it in a new tab, and then at the very end, when I have all my tabs collected, I just right click the image, and sometimes you can't. So the best way to do it is, if you're logged into DeviantArt, you can download it this way by hitting the free download button, or I do have this little plugin over here that's more of a web developer plugin, but it allows me to easily kind of save an image if right clicking on the image doesn't have that option pop up. So that is the way that you can get all your art assets off of DeviantArt. Once you have all of your art assets from DeviantArt all in one folder on your desktop, these are all the folder assets that I've gotten from DeviantArt. The next step in this process is to resize them, and I resize them to 500 dpi or pixels per inch. And to do that very easily, you can use Photoshop. If you don't have Photoshop, it's they believe they have like a 7-day free trial if you want to use it. It's a really cool tool. I'm a designer, so I use this tool all the time, so I have access to it, but it makes it super easy to resize images. I've tried doing this in MS Paint, but it's a really big headache, especially when you're doing it 40 times. So definitely would recommend getting Photoshop. You really don't need to do anything in Photoshop other than this resizing, and it's automated, so I'll show you how to do that. But and then 2, you'll need to just throw in all the resized images into a file, and then just kind of place them on a sheet like we saw before, where it's a 4x2. This is again the more involved method. However, I think it does give you a little bit more higher quality and a noticeable higher quality than the first method. So let's go back to our folder, So this folder I have under a file or a folder called Decks to Print, and this is a Blue Eyes proxy deck that I printed out, and then I have my folder that's like the original art assets. So these are all the art assets that I've downloaded from DeviantArt, and so when I open up Photoshop, so this is something that I had already made. However, when you first open Photoshop, you will kind of be at this screen. So you don't even need to open a file to do this, but you go to File, Scripts, Image Processor. This first folder is going to be our original art assets from DeviantArt. So let's select that. So I've got it here. Select original, select folder. So you want to select the folder, and then hit select folder. I believe it should automatically do that. And then the second folder is going to be where we want to be putting them into. So I made another folder called enlarged for print. So what that's going to be is our art assets that are at 500 dpi. So it's going to take what we originally had, and they're not going to be insanely bigger, but they are going to be a little bit bigger files. So that's going to be the destination. And then what I typically do is have these settings. I don't really change them that much except for the resize to fit. So this is important just because this is like what I've calculated out as the I think it's like 58 millimeters by 86 millimeters is like the dimensions of a Yu-Gi-Oh card. So I've had to kind of convert millimeters to inches and then inches to multiplied by 500 to get these numbers. So what you'll want to use is just these numbers right here. So 1240 for the width, and then 1732 for the height. That's what I found kind of making the best proxy cards that I've been able to make right now. So you can use those numbers. Once you're done here, you just hit the run button, and what Photoshop will do is open up each file, enlarge it, save it, shoot it into that destination folder, and then once we have all of those, we can go into placing them. The dimensions for this file are going to be not in millimeters. I mean, you could do millimeters, but in pixels. 4941 for the width, 3484 for the height. So those are the two important numbers in Photoshop, and that the resolution is going to be 500 pixels per inch. So that just shows you how big the dimensions are for this. We're going to open up our enlarged files, and we're going to put these, place these images into the Photoshop document by just selecting 8, because we're going to have 8 per page. Click and then drag them into the file. And right now we don't need to worry about these guides that I've created, but to place the files, you can just press enter, or the little check mark button up here. Enter is the easiest. You just kind of spam it until all the files have been placed. So this is where you kind of have to know a little bit about Photoshop. So in Photoshop, there is something called the layers panel in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. So that places, so we just placed 8 images into this file, which are these 8 right here. So in Photoshop, everything's in layers, and each image that we just placed is going to be its own layer. So there are 8 layers currently. I will usually group them, and to group them, you just hit Command or Control G. So now all of our cards are in one place. So when we click them, this little eyeball reveals or hides. So what I have done before this video is created guides that are to the size of our Yu-Gi-Oh cards. So if you remember that original size that we had discussed earlier for the size we were resizing them to with 500 DPI in mind, or 500 PPI in mind. That's what I did to get these individual sections. So what I typically do is hit Command or Control A, which highlights the entire artboard. And then what I do typically is hit V to select this top layer, Command A, and then there's these little, I don't know, icons. You don't have to do this, it makes things go a little bit faster for me, and it will select the layer, and we have our marquee selecting the entire artboard, and you can hit this align top button. So it'll align your layer to whatever else is selected, which was the artboard. So that's just a little shortcut, but what you can also do is Command T while your layer is selected. So this is what we'll be primarily doing in this file, is just once we put the files in, you're going to be resizing them to our guides that we have here. And the guides you can make, so I'm going to just resize it by clicking and dragging this little, I don't know what they're called, anchor point to our first of our guides. And again, I made guides that had the same 5mm gap in between each of the cards, like for the YGOProDeck method. So to complete it, you're just going to hit enter, and then you can click and drag it over to the left. So what you're going to do is do this for each of your files. I don't know why some of these files are different sizes, but I guess that's just the way it is in Photoshop. But for each one of these files, you're going to want to do the same thing and load them in like this. Keep doing that, Control T, Command T, line them up, and they should snap once you set the guides. So to get the proper guides made, what I did was take one of the, let me see if I can do it. I took one of the YGOProDeck layout and then put it into Photoshop, and then just measured the guides off of that, and then deleted the page. I have a couple of other decks that I've downloaded from YGOPro, so they're in PDF form right now. I'm gonna just click and drag it into Photoshop. There's this weird box that comes up, and what you'll want to do is just click the first box. We're trying to get our guides here, so it really doesn't matter if we get all of the pages in. So if you just download one of them, what you can do is click OK. And so that'll put them into your current file. So that one page, it'll just place it into the file, and you'll want to hit enter to place it. And what I did was, as you can see, they're lined up almost perfectly, I think perfectly, but so in Photoshop, you'll see these little rulers on the side. So when I zoom in, they'll get kind of wider. When I zoom out, they'll get smaller, and you'll see the numbers increase. But that is the pixel count of the file. And what you can do here is on the, they call them rulers. But what you can do here is click on the ruler and left click and drag, and it will move this line like this, and when you let go, it will add the guide to wherever you dropped it. And to move it, you just click on the guide and move it elsewhere. So you can adjust as needed. You don't need to worry about it being like the first shot to get to right where you need it. So I have to usually zoom in a lot here and just make sure that it's like appropriately at the spot where I can see that it meets the end of the card. And what I typically do is I'll do that for each. So I'll do it for the middle, which is just 2. So 2 all the way around, all the way across. And then for the gaps, I will take it from the left side. You can either take it from the left side or you can take it from the top, and then a little trick you can do is hit Alt and it will switch from being on the Y to being on the X axis. Again, you don't need to do it that way. You can just click and drag it from the left to get them, but that way you can make sure that your cards are going to be exactly one flush with each other. So when you're cutting them out, you're not cutting part of the card away by thinking one's a line and one isn't. So that's what I did to make the guides, and then what I did over the layers panel on the right hand side is just you can either hide it or delete it. I typically delete it, but so that's how the guides are made. Continue doing this for all the cards. It is, again, it's more time consuming, but as you kind of are doing this, you'll kind of find your own process to doing it a little bit faster. But again, this is like the way that I've found the best quality of prints is by doing it this way. So once you have them all aligned, and I like to put them in a group so I can hide them and start with the next one. And again, to do a group, you hit Command G, and you'll just want to select all of the layers that you have. So to quickly select your 8 layers, what I do is I select it in the layers panel by left clicking it, holding shift, and then left clicking the other file that I want within that group. And then once those are all selected, I hit Command G. So I just put it in another group, so I'm going to undo that, but that's how you create a group quickly. And then what you do is just hide that group once you want to start on another one. Once you have those groups all created, so it'll kind of look something like this. Once you have them created, so I have my own printer, so what I typically do is you can set this up in 1,000 different ways, but how I decided to set this up in Photoshop was each group, what I did was right click it, and it's a certain kind of grouping so that you can easily manipulate other settings in Photoshop by converting it to a smart object. And how you do that is you right click the layer, and then it'll be convert to smart objects right under mask all objects. So it's kind of towards the top of that drop down menu. But I just did that for all of my groups. So then that way it's easier for me to apply other effects to each group. So for the effects that I've added to each group, again, this is a little bit more labor intensive, but I've just added a sharpening filter under filters, and then it's called a neutral filter that gets rid of artifacting. So sometimes when you enlarge an image, you'll get a little bit of artifacts happening in there. You don't have to do this step. I like to do it just because it makes the words on the card a little bit easier to read. So I've just started and kept doing that. But the sharpening mask I think is really great because it also helps with the clarity of the words, especially the smaller words in the description of the card. And to get to those, you go to Filter, Sharpen. So this is specifically for the sharpening one. And then for some reason in Photoshop they call it Unsharp Mask, so I click that. And then my settings that I have for these assets is 85 for the amount, 2.5 for the radius, and then 10 for the threshold. And then I hit OK for that. And then a really quick way to apply that same filter across your other sheets that you're making is when you click on one of your sheets in the layers panel, you hit Command or Control Alt and then F. So what that does, it'll apply the filter that you just applied to that layer as well. Again, that just helps things move a little bit faster. So apply that to each one of your groups. Once we have all of those settings that I like to put in on these cards are finished, again, you don't need to do this. You can just, once you have them all resized onto your sheets, you can just go to print. So since I have my own printer, what I do is I'll go to File, Print, or you can just hit Command or Control P. And these are the settings that I use with my printer. So one, you'll want to first make sure that your correct printer is selected. And for the most important aspects of the printing process is the color handling. So I always allow Photoshop to manage the colors. That's just what I was taught in photography class and stuff like that when printing. Again, you can go through and kind of mess around with these settings yourself, but this is what I found works. And then this was a printer profile that was added once we did like the initial setup of our printer initially, because it prints out a little calibrating thing, and then you scan it and then it makes the profile, and that's what that profile is. So it analyzes what it already prints and then fixes it itself. And so that's the profile I use. You can again experiment around with what you have, but if your printer has something like that, I would just use it because it's specific to how it prints. Anyways, the other print settings that you'll want to use here, there aren't too many more, is where you'll want to go to normal printing. That's what I usually have it. For rendering intent, I always have it set to perceptual. Again, that was a photography class thing. You can experiment, but that's what I use. And make sure that black point compensation is on. As you scroll down here, you'll have these other settings. I don't typically touch them, except for make sure that your scaled print size, the scale is always at 100%. So since we don't have like a PDF generator like we did with the first method, in this method, you'll really want to make sure that the scale is 100%. And then it'll also show you that the print resolution is at 500 ppi for this particular print. And then it'll show you the exact height in inches or centimeters, depending on what metrics you have or measurements you have set as a default for your computer, for your Photoshop. All right, so once you have made sure that the scale is 100%, I don't mess with anything else on this little scroll bar, but I do go back up to print settings. So for my specific printer, when I open print settings, this is the pop-up that appears. And so it has like commonly used settings, standard photo printing, envelope, all of these kind of set the settings of your printer to a particular setting. I've specifically set up one for proxies. So what I typically do here is the only thing that I've changed is the media type, which is really important. Especially when you're printing on your own, you really need to make sure that your printer is printing on inkjet specific paper. And I've found through experimenting that the paper that I have, which I'll show you in a little bit, works best with this particular setting, which is photo papers. And under photo papers, that there's an additional drop down, and I go all the way to the bottom that says matte photo paper. So it doesn't specifically say that it's matte photo paper. I've just experimented enough where that's the setting that works best with the paper that I have and my printer. So those are the two kind of important settings here. The other setting that I usually have is print quality. If it's not already on high, just set it to high, making sure that your paper size is letter paper size, so 8.5 by 11 if you're printing on that. If you're printing on bigger paper, just make sure you're printing on bigger paper, but make sure your file also, make sure your file that you're setting up resembles what size of paper you're using. I would recommend, if you're following this guide, to just use 8.5 by 11, just because that's the majority of people have anyway. And make sure that letter size is selected here. Again, if this is on Mac and you're printing on Mac, this is going to look slightly different, but these are going to be settings that are universal. So just make sure you're looking for the printer paper size, the type of media, so what paper you're printing on, and the quality of the print as well. And then what you'll want to do is hit OK here if you're on Windows. Again, on Mac it might look slightly different, but that's pretty much it for the print settings. And before I hit print, I always just come and check the scale just to make sure that it's at 100%. So since it is at 100%, you click print. I'm not going to do that because I've already printed this deck, but you'll hit print, and then your printer will start printing it. Once you have those settings already set up in your file, you'll just need to print. You'll hit print where I hit done, but you'll hit print, and then your printer will start making noises and start printing. And then what you can do is go to the next sheet, hit Command or Control P, hit print again. All the settings will be saved, so you don't need to mess with them again. And so you'll just keep going through each layer that you have. Print, print, you'll print it, you'll print it, you'll print it, you'll print it, until you're done and you have all your sheets. Once you have your sheets all printed out, you can close Photoshop. So you'll have all your stacks of paper on your specific, so this is the type of paper that I use. So this is, don't know what specific poundage it is, but this is the specific paper that I use for my inkjet printer. You really want to make sure that you're using paper that says it's for inkjet, because if you don't, like I did at the beginning, and you're using laser printer paper, what happens is the quality of the print is a little bit off and the inks kind of start to bleed. I guess there's a special coating with inkjet paper that helps the ink dry out immediately once it's kind of on the piece of paper. I don't know all the technical parts of it, but that is just something to be aware of. And this paper is really great. It's a little bit expensive, but if you can find it on like a discount at your Staples or something, Amazon's pretty good, but you do have to wait 2 days for their shipping or whatever. But Epson's paper found it to be really great with this process and with my printer. The printer that I typically use is this printer here, the Canon TR8620. It says it's $200 right now, but it goes on sale for like $150, so just keep an eye out for that. The one thing that I think really helps with these cards feeling better is putting them through a lamination process. Like I showed you earlier, the FedEx method, if you do decide to laminate it with them, it makes the price of the deck triple. So if you're into like wanting to do this on your own, what I would recommend is getting some sort of thermal laminator from Amazon. They're pretty cheap. Like Amazon even has their own Amazon Basics pouches. So the plastic that goes around the paper, they're actually in pouch form. And I have been using 3mm paper, but I'm starting to think to use 5mm just to give it a little extra thickness. Because when feeling them side by side, the Yu-Gi-Oh cards are a little bit thicker. Again, if you're just wanting that little extra detail to be right up there with normal Yu-Gi-Oh cards, I would recommend getting the 5mm, but if you don't really care, 3mm is just fine. And then you cut them out. So this is a trimmer that I use. It's actually very good. You could use scissors. Again, if you're trying to optimize for speed through here, getting a trimmer like this, if you are going to be printing out a lot of text, of course you can put them in any sleeves that you want. Again, these are going to be 100, like the exact size of Yu-Gi-Oh cards, so when you put them in the sleeve, they'll fit just like Yu-Gi-Oh cards. One thing that I had to learn while I was cutting them is you want to cut just shy of the edge of the print, so then when the blade goes over it, it will shave off a little bit, only a little bit of the ink that you printed out, rather than if you do it right up against the edge, it will actually cut a significant amount off. That's the two ways that I've made Yu-Gi-Oh proxy cards. The first way, again, is a lot faster, a lot more economical, especially if you just want to do it once or twice. And the second way is definitely for people who are constantly wanting to practice the new decks that are coming out, and it's definitely worth investing in a couple of these products rather than buying the actual cards. So would definitely recommend if that is the sort of person you are. Thank you all for watching this video. If you liked the video, make sure you hit a thumbs up. If you didn't, dislike it, let me know in the comment section below. But also make sure you subscribe if you did like it, and let me know in the comment section below if you want to see a proxy tutorial or how-to guide for Magic the Gathering. I don't play Magic the Gathering too intensely, but a similar process you can do that you do with Yu-Gi-Oh proxies. So just let me know in the comment section below if you want to see that, and I can make that video. Keep a lookout for more videos from Read Your Cards in the next couple of months, and we'll see you soon. Bye.